As details of County Executive Mark Elridge's $6.8 million budget that includes a 10% property tax increase are exposed, spark debates are coming from all quarters, including the County Council and the public. At a public hearing last week, speakers voiced their concern. Avi Adler, board member of the Greater Capital Area Association of Realtors, spoke for many when he said, "The large property tax increase that has been proposed seems inconsistent with the current economic landscape." Mike, as a former council member, how do you balance the concerns expressed by Adler and other business leaders and the needs of the county?
Well, I think it's more than just Adler and the business concerns. I think the reality is that a lot of residents are very concerned as well. In addition to just what he's proposing for property tax increases, most people's property assessments are increasing as well. So most people are going to see a property tax increase anyway. And so that's irrespective of whatever Mark has proposed. And so I think that there are a lot of resources that exist in our budget right now without having to raise 10% property taxes, which candidly, if they could reapportion what the county executive has proposed, you could come pretty close to meeting the county's needs without a tax increase. I just, when you look what's out there, it just doesn't make any sense. And the challenge is he's got so many gimmicks in what's out there that it makes it really challenging. So even the pay increases, he's masked because he's phased them in. So in year one, it looks like there's only about $60 million in increases when the reality is it's over $100 million once you annualize it. So there are just so many things. We could probably spend the next 20 minutes talking about the challenges and fallacies associated with this budget.
Well, you just covered my second question to you, so we just saved 5 minutes.
That's okay. I've got more I can put out there.
Good.
Rest assured.
Reardon, you ran for county executive in the past election, so you must have some ideas about this proposed budget by Mr. Elridge.
Absolutely. First of all, Mike, I want to thank you for that introduction. You could actually be a Republican. That was great. And when you look into the budget, really,
I like to think it's more just being rational.
Republican rational. We're
nice try.
The narrative that Elridge is putting out there is that the tax increase is basically for our schools. And at the end of the day, that's really patently false. There are many agencies within Montgomery County that are actually getting double-digit increases and above what's being proposed for the schools. And like Mike, like you were saying, we need to really look at the budget and examine the budget. I looked at the Montgomery County checkbook, which is basically the check register for last year, and I found over 25,000 checks written to quote anonymous, and that dollar value totaled over $155 million. When you take a look at our debt, our payment on our debt, basically our credit cards, we're racking up debt at an incredibly high rate. That's like the second highest line item in the budget when you take out what's being allocated for schools. Also, the fourth highest expense item is quote not defined. I know, Mike, as a business owner, if somebody brought you a budget with the fourth highest line item says not defined, you say, no, you need to go define it and give me a real budget. I mean, realistically. Yeah. And your point is spot on. The real increase to property tax is not 10%. It's actually going to be closer to 15 when you factor in the increase in the assessments. Also, the budget has over $20 million in what's known as future grants. I mean, back in the day, we would call that parked money. And the residents are really getting upset. I mean, when we use our phones, we get taxed.
Reardon, I want to follow up with Mike because Mike did talk about some of the budget gimmicks that are there. So is Montgomery County residents just becoming the piggy bank for Mark Elridge's excessive spending plans?
Well, I think part of the challenge that we really are confronted with is people paying attention. We all know, unfortunately, that people tend to pay attention to things that happen at the federal level, and things that happen at the local level actually have a greater impact on kind of their day-to-day lives. And so if you listen to, as Reardon said, to Mark's perspective that this is all for education, which is false, I think that people go, oh, well, this is for schools. that can be true. Portion, I think, will be going to schools, but the reality is there's no clarity as far as what that plan for schools is. And so I think, at least in the communities I've talked to, people are starting to ask that question of, okay, if we need increased resources for these activities, tell me what those are and tell me what we're going to spend it on.
Now, is that coming from the council members or is that coming from the public?
I think it's coming from both. I've been actually impressed with a number of the council members, how they're approaching the budget. So basically they've taken everything that the county executive has proposed and park that on a reconciliation list so it all competes with itself, as opposed to assume it in a base budget analysis, which is different than what they've done in the past. So that's actually a pretty good sign, and unusual for them to do that. But I think one of the biggest concerns I have is that the county executive, by trying to say this is all for schools, basically is trying to avoid the charter, the number of votes required for the charter limit to ultimately have a tax increase because of a loophole that exists within the state budget. And I think that that's a piece, people, that the council really needs to stand firm on, because it's fungible, and we've got to make sure that this is if they're going to pass it, it's got to be a unanimous vote.
Well, so Reardon, this next question is for you, and it kind of bleeds into our next topic about the quality of our schools. Columnist David Rubin, who's with the American Enterprise Institute, wrote a piece that says Montgomery County is becoming the next San Francisco. Now, some can say that's a great thing because San Francisco is so pretty, but his piece is rather negative. And let me read a little bit from it. San Francisco and Montgomery County have much in common. They have roughly the same population. Both became magnets for educated professionals attracted by niche jobs and top schools. Both are essentially one-party governments, but the problem is not partisan, rather the lack of accountability when any party dominates for so long. Like his compatriots in San Francisco, Montgomery County Executive Mark Elridge has embraced both big government and progressive fads. He recently proposed a 10% property tax increase and a ballooning budget that dips deep into county reserves and commits the county to future mandatory spending as a recession looms. This in turn will mandate even greater tax hikes, and etc. Reardon, what's your reaction? Is Montgomery County on the road to perdition?
I've often said that Montgomery County is California East, and that's exactly true. And I think part of the result will be the people that can leave because we're being overtaxed and overregulated will leave. That's going to reduce our tax base, and not so we don't have as much money as we would like to have to do the things we really need to do. The average income in the county is going down, and I think he's spot on.
So,
Mike, any thoughts about Reardon's?
What Reardon just said? I don't think it's quite as dire, and I'm not sure that we're California East. I do think there are concerns, and I think that this council so far has actually started to raise the right questions. So, I mean, accountability can be two parties. Sometimes that just becomes partisan politics. So I don't necessarily know that one party in and of itself is a horrible thing. I generally have always said, I think having both parties represented moves the ball forward because you get a variety of viewpoints. I think the bigger challenge this year, and one of the things we've got to really pay attention to, is how do these decisions that this council is going to make impact the next 2 to 3 years of our county, because we don't have that many resources. And the part I do agree that Reardon put out there is we are seeing our tax base decline. We are seeing people leave. And the reality is we've got to be able to understand that and make sure that we're budgeting appropriately. And we can't already have ourselves in a cyclical structural deficit for next year before we even get this year's budget passed.